Hebrews. I was looking for a verse last week that I found this week. Accidentally, I wasn't even looking for it. I was just reading and it came up. Hebrews 9:23, therefore it was necessary that the copies of the things in the heavens should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ has not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. And Paul's assertion was that the tabernacle on earth was a copy of what was in heaven. And so that's when we start to come back then to the book of Exodus, and let me draw you back that way, that's the reason for the overabundance, if you will, of detail that God gave. And so what we'll find is that God gave tremendous instruction detail-wise, and then he supernaturally gifted some people to carry out the instructions. Which, again, when you look at the models that are built today, they lack that particular element. You get artisans, you get craftsmen, you get people who are trying to read what's written, interpret it, and reproduce it. But one of the things they don't have is that supernatural gifting that God gave to some very specific people, and we'll look at them, to carry out the work that was done. You think, how in the world does somebody have the knowledge and the ability to do some of the metalwork and stuff and some of the intricacy things that we see? And the honest answer is God gifted them with that ability. I think God gives gifts to people anyway, artistic-wise, as well as anything else. Some people just have a lot of, right, as everybody points at Cindy, he has, that's fine. Some he gifted to talk and some he gifted to do. It's a good thing. And so, God gives, you look at, have you ever been to Newport and walked around? They actually have a glass store there where they blow glass. Have you ever watched those guys work, blowing glass? It's amazing what they can do. Yeah, you see those videos out there, they're incredible. The guys who can paint upside down in reverse colors, and then you look at it and you're like, no idea, and he turns it over, it's Bruce Lee. That kind of a thing. You're like, whoa, where the, and so there is certainly a gift that people have in the arts, and that's include, metalworking, the whole thing, all of that. And I think those gifts are God-given, abilities are God-given, just like any other gift. Some people have mechanical gifts, some of us not so much. Different people have different strengths. What God did for these guys, I think, is closer to what he does for Christians, because God gives, when we get saved, God gives us gifts in addition to just salvation. Often, they complement our natural strengths and abilities that he already gave us, but not always. Sometimes it's just this new thing that emerges, as we have a need or as he places a call on us. One of the stories that I heard, and I never met the guy, but I knew people who knew him, was somebody who went to college, who was tone deaf when he got to college, but really felt that God had called him to be a worship leader, which, it just on the outset is like, probably not. Me looking at it, I'd be like, you can't carry a note even if I gave you a bucket to hold it in, and so maybe you misinterpreted it, but he was dead on. No, this is what God has called me to do. This is what I'm going to do, and he worked at it, and by the time he was done with college, he could read, write, play, sing, the whole business, and went on to work as a worship leader. It was an amazing thing. That is definitely a case of God giving a gift to somebody as a result of a calling that he placed on their life that had nothing to do with their natural strengths and abilities, because he didn't have any. But God allowed him to have those. So I think as we get to these guys, that's what we're going to see. So let me jump into, and we're going to move through about a dozen chapters very quickly here. We're going to look at, let's see, where do we want to start? I want to start... where did I start? All right, let's start with in chapter 25. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel that they bring me an offering. From everyone who gives it willingly with his heart, you shall take my offering. And this is the offering which you shall take from them: gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet thread, fine linen, and goat's hair, ram skin dyed red, badger skins, and acacia wood, oil for the light, and spices for the anointing oil and for the sweet incense, onyx stones and stones to be set in the ephod and the breastplate, and let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. According to all that I show you, that is the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it." And I start there because that's where God started this whole process, going into the tabernacle itself. Could you imagine that offering? All right, we need the purple there, the red there, the blue there, the linen. Hey, those badger skins, they can go over here. This was not like a pass the offering plate. It was pass the people by the offering pile. But God said, look, the work of my tabernacle is going to be provided for by my people. You hear me say it all the time on Sunday mornings that giving is an act of worship. And one of the things that we don't do a lot of, and we never will, is a lot of fundraising. And the reason is, there are a lot of reasons, but the quick reason is fundraising is a diversion of attention. If we divert our attention to raising money, we miss the point. Now, whether we do that ourselves to raise money for the church, but the work of the church, the work of God's house, has always been supported by God's people. It may not be the most efficient way, but it is the most effective way, because it keeps God's people engaged in God's work. Jesus said, "Where your heart is, there will your treasure be also." That backwards as well. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. The more you give, the more vested you will be. And so the people began to give, and that was the expectation, that you're going to give what you have, you're going to build my house that way. So not to beat a dead horse on offerings, because I say it a lot, but just understand there is long-term biblical principles, precedents that we rely on that goes all the way back to Exodus and keeps going forward about how the work of the ministry is to be provided for. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point. He goes into then the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of the Testimony, how it's to be constructed. And then he gets into, and I'm just reading my section headers here, and you might see them as well, gets into the table of showbread, how it's to be constructed and done. And he gets into the golden lampstand. And so as we think about the arrangement of the tabernacle itself, we talked about the tabernacle having an outer courtyard, then having a holy place, and then having the most holy place, or the Holy of Holies. And as we start, you notice he actually starts in the holy place and works his way out. Start with the Ark of the Covenant, the only thing that was in the most holy place, and then it comes into the most holy place. Then he goes into the holy place and starts talking about the table of showbread and the golden lampstand and the altar that's in there. Then he talks about the tabernacle in chapter 26, and this is the tent itself. The word tabernacle just means tent. And so this is the tent. This is the covering. And there were multiple layers that the tabernacle was in. So you have this multi-layered tent, and then you have a tent over it, and then you have the courtyard. And so it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's the detail is incredible as you read through chapter 26. I'm not going to go there. Chapter 27, he then gets into the altar of burnt offering. And so this is the altar that's now in the outer courtyard. He's already talked about that, where the sacrifices are going to be made. It's everything in here, as you think about it, and let me pause for just a moment, but everything that you see in these pages, and I say, you hear me say all the time, you could spend a year talking about the tabernacle. You really could, and you really wouldn't still say it all. Because just the level of detail takes a lot of time. And then you add to that the symbolism behind everything. Everything that you read in here is symbolic. Dimensionally symbolic, materials, the placement, the use, everything in here has, amazing symbolism. You have the wood that's being used, this acacia wood that was, not uncommon in that area. But then you get just off the top of your head, anybody know what the Ark of the Covenant or the Ark of Testimony was covered in? Because it wasn't solid, it was wood covered with gold, Right, you step out and you have the lampstand was made out of gold, and you have the altar of incense was made out of, on the inside it was made out of gold. The table of showbread, no, it's fine. The table of showbread is gold. You move out another layer, and you get to the primary altar there, the altar burnt offerings, and that was covered in brass. No, now you that one was brass. The brazen laver, the big brass bathtub, and there is significance to the metals that are being used and where they're being placed and all that. So I mean, you really could talk a long time. So if you do, and I would encourage you to read through this. It's not the easiest of reading, but just seeing the level of detail that God pays and gives and specifies to this is just amazing. So we get the altar of burnt offering, and then he talks about the care of the lampstand, how you're supposed to take care of it, when it needs to be refilled, all those kinds of things. Chapter 28, you get the garments of the priesthood. So it starts talking about, what the priests are going to wear, and it gets all the way down to make sure they wear underwear. It's crazy. You get the ephod, which is the covering that the high priest is going to wear, kind of like his golden breastplate that's, encrusted with gemstones. Pretty interesting. The other priestly garments even gets down to the hat that the high priest is going to wear and the turbans that the other priests are going to wear. It's amazing. You get in chapter 29 the consecration of Aaron and his sons. Let's see. The daily offerings, the altar of incense, the bronze laver, it just keeps going and going and going. Chapter 31, you begin to get the artisans, a mention of the artisans who are going to be constructing this. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, in wisdom, in understanding, in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship, to design artistic works, to work in gold, in silver, and bronze, in cutting jewels for setting, in carving wood, and to work in all manner of workmanship." And so God said, look, I'm calling him specifically, and I am gifting him specifically. He must have been quite the jeweler at the end of this process. And indeed, I have appointed with him Ahiolab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, and I have put wisdom in the hearts of all the gifted artisans, that they may make all that I have commanded you: the tabernacle of meeting, the ark of the testimony, and the mercy seat that is on it, and all the furniture of the tabernacle and the table and its utensils, the pure gold lampstand with all its utensils, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering with all its utensils, and the laver and its base, the garments of ministry, and the holy garments for Aaron the priest, and the garments of his sons to minister as priests, and the anointing oil and the sweet incense in the holy place, according to all that I have commanded you, they shall do. I mean, you think about what God is calling here. He's calling some by name, and then he's giving others, just, saying there are other people who can do this. Excuse me. But you think about the many disciplines that are involved in what's going on here. I mean, you have woodworking. You have to, many of these things were made of wood first and then coated in gold. The process of overlaying gold over wood without actually burning it on fire is got to be an interesting job as well. Some things are made out of gold, out of pure gold to start with, and they're, kind of hammered and beat. And so you get the metalworking ability, completely different discipline. Cutting gemstones, again, different discipline. You get the weaving of cloth, completely different process. Taking that cloth and then turning it into these garments. If you've ever tried to sew a button on or make a shirt, you appreciate that is not the easiest process. Kate is great. She makes quilts, and it just amazes me to see a bunch of what looks like confetti come together into this blanket. It just amazes. To see what can actually happen. When if I put a button on my shirt, about 3 weeks later, I'm going to have to put it on again. And so I just keep a supply of buttons because I just got to keep doing it. Or throw away the shirt, or wear it without a button, whatever. But, Stephen. Yeah, they're doing, the shop is in the desert. Yes. The whole thing has to be portable, right? And and despite that, and that's the amazing thing. You start thinking about the tabernacle and the fact that, after they built it, I think they were stationary long enough to get the whole thing going. But then, then it came the day they had to take it all down and carry it. And God had instructions on how things were to be covered, how they were to be carried, how they were to be done. We think about the Ark of the Covenant and how it was to be carried. Anybody know off the top of your head? On staves, on poles, on these golden poles. And so all of them were all of the furniture was fitted with rings, and they slid the poles through and walked it away. But think about how that would happen and the order it would happen, because the priest would first have to go in and they would have to begin to break down the interior of the tabernacle, and they would actually cover the furniture. So it would get a covering of purple or red or blue, one of those three, and then a lot of them got a badger cover after that, so it was waterproofed as well. And it wasn't until all of that was done inside and began to be broken down that the Levites could enter. And so you're carrying around this furniture around the desert. Can you imagine carrying a box of any size that's covered in gold, on poles that are covered in gold, on your shoulders, and never seeing it because it was always covered? It was covered when you picked it up. It was covered when you dropped it off. The priest would go in and remove the coverings after the fact. And so these guys, there were guys who literally spent their lives carrying the Ark of the Covenant around the desert and never saw it. Amazing. And the amount of sacrifice because these are young, strong men who their wives are carrying their house gear because they're carrying the tabernacle gear. The commitment of the Levites as a tribe to their work is just incredible. But God was very specific. Did God take it seriously that the poles were to be used to carry the altar? Yeah, the one time they tried to move in a cart, that didn't work out so well. Dude died. In this room? Yep. Yeah, but if they got to the outer court, the outer court was still for the men. They had a court around that they would let the women into. But you still had, you were like the way outer districts. Yeah, and that would be formalized when you get into the temple area. They have the temple. You have the temple itself. You have the court of the Jews, the court of the women, the court of the Gentiles. The farther you are from God, the farther you stay from God. There's no way to get in. Yeah, but all done by men. It is an amazing thing, that we loosely, not us, but people in general, think of cooking as women's work or sewing as women's work, and yet all of the big name chefs, all of the big name tailors, they're all guys. Yeah. Yeah. I've never done embroidery, but yeah, they embroidered angels on the curtains. It was just, wow. Just really, really high-end stuff that God had them do. And it gets all the way down into, how to make the oil for anointing, how to, the recipe for the incense, the warnings. Okay, here, you've got the recipes. Don't use them for anything but this. If you use it for that, it's going to go badly. And he gets into that. And then in the middle of all this, here's Moses up on the mountain receiving all of this instruction for God. What's happening in the camp? Chapter 32. They're building a calf. You'll wonder. You got to think he had Moses' handprint permanently across his cheek. Here's Moses. He's up getting all of this intricate detail from God. He comes, and God goes, I think you've got a problem. You might want to get back down there. And Moses gets partway down. He picks up Joshua, who's been waiting for 40 days, just like hanging around halfway up the mountain. And Joshua goes, hey, it sounds like war down there. And Moses is like, it's not war, but it's fixing to be. And here they'd made this stupid golden calf in the process. Yeah, and not a good one, not a wholesome one. Funny how that happens. And so they get with this, and you keep going on. And so you get down to chapter 35. Moses said to the children of Israel, in verse 30, chapter 35, verse 30. Moses said to the children of Israel, "See, the Lord has called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. And he has filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom and understanding and knowledge and all manner of workmanship, to design artistic works, to work in gold and silver and bronze, and cutting jewels for setting and carving wood, and to work in all manner of artistic workmanship." Again, the supernatural cross-discipline gifting that this guy really could do it all. And he has put in his heart the ability to teach. In him and in Ahialab, the son of Ahishabak, of the tribe of Dan, he has filled them with skill to do all manner of work of the engraver and the designer and the tapestry maker in blue, purple, and scarlet thread and fine linen, and of the weaver, those who do every work and those who design artistic works. And so God's gifted these guys, and not just gave them the tremendous ability to do, but gave them the ability to teach as well. And those two things don't always go together. Sometimes the people who are the best practitioners are the worst teachers because it comes so naturally that they don't know how they do it. They just do it. You ever met anybody like that who just really was good at something but very poor at describing it? And we instinctively think, wow, if you're really good at that, you should be able to teach it. But it turns out the people who are less good at it are better at teaching it because they have to work at it. They have to break it apart, analyze it, synthesize the information, put it all back together. They have to teach themselves, and so they're able to teach others. The people who are typically the best at anything usually come so naturally that they don't necessarily know how they do it. They just know that they do. And you think about, athletes, how the elite athletes of the world, yes, they work hard, but their athleticism is something that comes naturally. You look at people who are just naturally artistic, whether it's music, the arts, or anything, they just understand music. I'm all the time amazed. Between Pastor Carl and Kate, honestly, the two of them amaze me week in and week out because they just do music. They don't think about it. It just comes out. The rest of us are like, what's that chord? What's that key? What's that thing? I've never once heard Pastor Carl say, hey, what key are you in? Have you ever asked that question? He's like, you're embarrassing me. Right, he's like, you're embarrassing me. Sorry, sort of. Right, exactly. Off key. Right, that's where I land most of the time. But he just hears something and begins playing it. He understands the music at an instinctive level that it just comes out. Kate, people all the time, how can you talk and play the piano at the same time? She just does. There's no practice. There's no way to learn that. To sit there and talk, that disconnect in your brain. That does, one goes this way, one goes, it's amazing. How do you change keys the way she does? And her honest answer is, I just move my hands here and play it the same way. And most musicians are like, because it's just music comes out. And so being the person who's proficient, pastors, it happens even in my career, the top pastors in the world, the guys who are so eloquent, great speakers, they have other people study how they do what they do because they are not really good at explaining how they do what they do. It's just an instinctive way that you do what you do. And so the fact that God placed in their hearts not only this supernatural ability, but the ability as well to teach others how to do. This is how you make an angel's wing when you're embroidering. That's a clever lesson. Chapter 36, and Bezalel and Ahialab and every gifted artisan in whom the Lord has put wisdom and understanding to know how to do all manner of work for the service of the sanctuary shall do according to all that the Lord has commanded. And so Moses says, look, God put it in their hearts. We're going to go. So, that offering we talked about 12 chapters ago, it's time to go. And so he goes in chapter 36, verse 2. This is one of the coolest passages in the Bible because it doesn't happen often. Then Moses called Bezalel and Ahialab and every gifted artisan in whose heart the Lord had put wisdom, and everyone whose heart was stirred to come and do the work. And they received from Moses all the offering which the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of making the sanctuary. So they continued bringing to him freewill offerings every morning. So people just come every day. They're just coming and they're giving stuff, and it's all free will. There was no compulsory thing here. There was no, you must give this quota. It was just people, as God stirred their heart, were just giving their stuff freely. Then all the craftsmen who were doing all the work of the sanctuary came, each from work he was doing, and they spoke to Moses, saying, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which the Lord has given us to do. So Moses gave a commandment, and they caused it to be proclaimed through all the camp, saying, let neither man nor woman do any more work for the offering of the sanctuary. And the people were restrained from bringing, for the material they had was sufficient for all the work to be done. Indeed, too much. Have you ever, in all of your collective church experience years, heard a pastor say, we're not going to take an offering today, and please don't write us any checks today. We have too much. Has that ever happened? Now, I've been in church since I was 7, so I'm not going to tell you how many, let's see, like 38 years, is that right? 38, whatever it is. I've never heard that. I mean, I've been in church since the time I was 7 years old. I've been to a lot of churches. I was an Air Force brat. We moved all around the country. I've never heard that. Stop giving. We have too much. So you can imagine, as a pastor, I just find this particular passage incredibly amusing, incredibly strange. It's just so far outside. But that is the level of, and it wasn't like, again, it wasn't compulsory. They were just, making stuff and bringing stuff and they were out hunting badgers and, whatever else they needed to do. Hey, we found an acacia tree, cut it down, bring it in. They literally, this is the kind of stuff they were doing. Weaving whatever they could, finding whatever they could, just bring it. And Moses was finally like, stop, please. It's just too much. We're going to have to return some of this. And we didn't give you receipts, so we don't know. But that was, so anyway, I just find that particular passage amusing, and somewhat ironic because it's so outside of our normal experience. And yet, it was only a couple chapters ago that these people were like dancing naked around a golden calf. So understand, it's not like they were super spiritual people. They were like normal people. What's that? Yeah, but fervent, wishy-washy. When they were hot, they were hot. And when they were cold, wow, they were stone cold. And so if we were to continue in chapter 36 then, after we get all of the recipes and patterns laid out, guess what happens? They make all the stuff that God told them to make in just about the same level of detail that God planned it. We get it recorded, and they did this the way God said, and they did this the way God said. And so the next several chapters are them constructing the things exactly the way that God told them to instruct it, and recording the construction of those things in the same level of detail that God gave them. And so you get this, the next several chapters read a lot like the previous several chapters, because they are just, hey, we did the work according to the way God said to do it. And so they go through and go through and go through. Whew, finally, look, I'm like 14 chapters in. That's pretty good. So we get into chapter 39 and verse 32. Thus all the work of the tabernacle of the tent of meeting was finished, and the children of Israel did according to all that the Lord commanded Moses, so they did. So they brought the tabernacle together. Guess what they did after they made everything? They set it all up. And they consecrated the priests. And then the cloud covered the tabernacle of meeting in verse 34 of chapter 40. And Moses was not able to enter the tabernacle of meeting because of the cloud rested above it. And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would go onward in all their journeys. Break it all down, move it all. But if the cloud was not taken up, then they did not journey till the day that it was taken up. So they didn't even know. You wake up in the morning, where's the cloud? Is today a packing day or not a packing day? Is today a moving day or a staying day? And I guess at some point you root for staying days because they're a lot easier. But every morning, they would, I can imagine in Israel, everybody head pops out of the tent, looks over the tabernacle, oh, cloud's up, time to go. And that's literally what it was. They never know. For the cloud of the Lord was above the tabernacle by day, and fire was over it by night in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. God was visibly present with them and visibly leading them as they went. Centered over this place that he had them build, the tabernacle. Just amazing. God's presence, all the details that went with it. But too much for us to cover. So, like I said, I'd encourage you to read through it. It is not easy reading. I will give you that. It's interesting reading, and if you study it, it's incredibly fascinating. But just on a straight read through, it is a little dry. So I'll caution you that ahead of time. But it is worth the effort if you'll put it in. Any questions? We have like half a minute here.